And we are live. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today at Solving Martech. We're talking about unlocking your email program's full potential. We'll go into intros in just a second, but before we do, let's talk a little bit about Trendline. Go to the next slide, Mr. Williams. So Trendline, built from email marketing. We are now an agency and consulting that inspires meaningful engagement through cross-channel communications. What does that actually mean in the numbers? Well, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year, so we're on our 11th year of business right now. We made 2 acquisitions earlier this year, so we're just north of 230 people. We have 6 offices located across the United States and Canada. All of this is to say that we support many campaigns. We send over 20,000 campaigns from all types of promotional, transactional. We work with teams that work in waterfall or agile, really try to augment existing teams or do the entire thing full service, soup to nuts. We send about 3 billion messages a year over email, SMS, and push, so kind of an omni-channel approach to messaging. And we were 1862 on the Inc. 5000 last year. So here are the numbers, but what does that actually mean for the people you're about to hear from? Go to the next slide, please, Mr. Williams. Myself, my name is Scott Bertzel. I'm a practice lead here at Trendline. I've been at Trendline for about 5 years. We also have Mr. Williams, Alex Williams, on the call, actually our 4th hire. So he's been here for all 11 years. And he's also a practice leader. We also have Celia Martin, who is a principal consultant. Celia, thank you for joining us. She and her family, fun fact about her, she and her family actually lived in Europe for 2 years while she led setup and partner integration for a global airlines marketing platform. So no small feat dealing with those types of time zone complications. So these are the people you're going to be hearing from today. And we'll go through the agenda in just a moment. Actually, right now in this slide. So defining your Martech needs. In this category, we're talking a little bit about common challenges we see often on the agency side, where we'll discuss most frequent complaints we hear working with Martech stacks. We'll discuss 3 factors to define your philosophy moving forward and assessing your current situation. We'll discuss the major questions the company should ask before committing to a long-term commitment with a SaaS platform. Understanding the landscape, we'll talk a little bit about, there's a vast marketing software landscape, but we'll be using 4 categories of tech messaging platforms to act as a guide. And then we'll talk a little bit about paths forward, whether your path is staying with your current technology or augmenting your team with additional resources or skills, or switch providers entirely that better supports your Martech philosophy. Before we go any further, I would like to define Martech, since it has many definitions depending on what conference you're at. So what is or isn't Martech? For our purposes today, obviously Martech is huge, but we aren't here to talk about the big ambiguous Martech landscape. We're here more to focus on Martech as any software, service, or process that impacts your marketing team, specifically your messaging partner or provider, and the support system immediately around that. The landscape often becomes confusing because marketers are left having to navigate various overlapping naming conventions and terminologies with platforms with acronyms like ESP and MAP, CRM, CDP. So we'll be discussing services that are applicable for many types of organizations, including e-commerce companies, subscription businesses, marketplaces, for both B2B and B2C organizations. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Celia.
Great, thanks, Scott. So before we dig into what we're trying to do, look at all the platforms, the bells and whistles, we need to look internally. Personally, I love shopping, whether it's personal or for professional gains. I love seeing all the new bells and whistles. It's fun to see the demos, but we're here to warn you, don't get sold on that demo. We need to take a look at the platforms holistically. So before we do that, we look internally and we try to see, how are we going to use this technology? How are we using technology today? We really need to do that internal assessment, not just with our own group, but across the organization, whether it's marketing, IT, management, because you really want to look at it holistically and make sure that all the key players have had their say before you go shopping. In the past, I've accomplished this by doing one-on-ones and then really larger group meetings, usually bribe a little bit with some lunch working sessions, pre-COVID, of course, and maybe some candies to keep people engaged. But it really helps to have everybody say and everybody in the room to make sure that it works. So yeah, and even if you don't know who might use it in the future, it's just nice to ask and try to get anyone who might be using your platform in the future, because you never know how your process is going to overlap with someone else's. So we will start with using the Diamond E platform. Alex, if you'll go to the next. So there's lots of frameworks out there to help organize this discussion with your own team or across the organization. We like the Diamond E model because it's simple. It helps illustrate the competing forces organizations have to balance what those strategic sources are. So our adaptation of the Diamond E framework, we look at performance, environment, management preferences, and then those resource constraints. We often see companies, just to tie it together, we often see companies that do what they want to do, or maybe you've brought another technology over to the company you're at right now. And a lot of times these may lead to Martech issues because you didn't really look at all of the three forces together. So let's start with need to do. Some questions we want to walk our clients through are, what are your company's growth goals? What deliverables have been assigned to the marketing team? What are your competitors doing? And then what are your client or customers' needs right now? And what are you doing to fulfill those needs? That'll help you really assess the gaps and what you really need out of a platform before you go searching. So next we look at want to do, or the management preferences. Sometimes it's not as easy as this is what we need to do, so we're going to do it. There's always management preferences that come in, or other departments who really have their own priorities that will layer onto your own strategies. Here's where we need to look at, what is our tech stack methodology? What do we want to do with our platform or technologies in-house? Ask yourself, do you invest in these suites, the product suites that have everything, or do you want to have a best-in-class niche expert to plug into some of your in-home technology or other programs that you already have? You need to ask, who owns this technology platform? Is it marketing? Is it IT? Is it both? Most times it'll be both. And then what's your usability preference? Do you want it to be intuitive because that's the team that you have and they can intuitively deal with the platform? Or do you want power and somebody who's maybe more developer and can do a little bit more with the platform? And then lastly, we look at can do, and this is based on our resources. This kind of helps you prioritize your wants and needs with what you really can do as an organization. This takes into consideration timelines, people to actually do the work, and oftentimes money. So things that you want to ask in this scenario are, what's your technology budget? How many business units are going to be using it? So again, gathering that full group, making sure that everybody has a say so that the platform will really go to use for your organization. Oftentimes we see, if you work in a silo for this can do, you have one group who really knows how to use the platform. They're using it fully as much as they can. And you have another group who ends up going out and buying another platform because they just can't use it. So coming from a corporate side, I have worked alongside our IT and our sales departments and tried to negotiate, okay, well, we need this from a platform and this from a technology enhancement. And sometimes that takes a master's in negotiation. But if you've got the ROI to back it up on what your program, what your marketing is going to do for the company, it goes a long way and it really helps in the discussion for searching out the right platform. So we'll highlight some of the imbalances that sometimes we see when we don't take these three things into consideration a little later. But the point is, marketing and IT really need to work together. They need to collaborate, and it's through the whole process. It's defining the needs, searching for technology, making the decisions, and of course, implementation. It's got to be a handshake through the whole process.
Talk a little bit about the landscape, right? Let's move on to discuss the landscape as it relates to specific sending platforms. So in this section, we'll discuss the four main types of platforms we use when dealing with large amounts of subscriber data. So the first one we're going to dive into is self-service ESPs. These are often the first pieces of software that marketers are exposed to because they're extremely easy to use and often offer a solution tailored to smaller teams with team members that often have to wear many hats. Celia, how do you describe these types of self-service ESPs to clients?
Definitely suited for people who are new to marketing, people who, like you said, do everything on the marketing team. People have little to no budget, but they really need to get their message out. These are low code, no code. You really don't need a lot of IT integration. It's really to set it up and then let it go.
When a client comes with these, what is the common scenario, or talking points, pain points that they would bring to you?
Yeah, I think over the years I've talked to a lot of customers that are using the self-serve model, and a lot of the signals you see that outgrowing it, or I like to call it graduating. The pricing is really attractive until it isn't, right? Because they're not designed for that type of volume. When you're starting to see all of this transparent pricing, and then you get to a certain level and it says, get an enterprise quote or something to that effect, you're probably hitting the limit. Also, does anybody have the word email in their title, right? A lot of times, if it's a small team and they're doing social, they're doing email, they're doing ad buys, that type, it's really effective because you can get in and get out and get what you need done. When I like to refer to the email business model. What are we hiring email to do? What's the impact on the organization? If that business model starts to mature, your program starts to grow quickly, and you start to have a lot of different needs for different types of messages. Also, it really comes down a lot of times to data and decisioning, right? So when you want to really start orchestrating specific experiences around, particular touch points people have, displaying particular data, real time, that sort of nature, you're probably hitting that piece to graduate. But if you need a tool and the price works, and like Celia said, you need to get in and get out, these are great options.
Thanks for I think that's wonderful summary. We move on to the next category. We're going to be talking about developer-friendly platforms, and I want to head this off at the pass. In theory, these should all be developer-friendly platforms, right? But what we mean by this is that these are platforms that are often used to handle very transactional-heavy programs. Celia, is that your experience as well with these types of platforms?
Absolutely. So not every technology is plug and play, as you know. And sometimes these developer-friendly platforms are even better for those who are not the marketer on the team. They don't really have new campaigns to go in front of their clients or customers. They want to just use API codes to create their email campaign. They want unstructured data to make sure that whatever they want to send is going to work. And really just have it to be a little bit more transactional, just trying to get the information out and be able to do that. But these do, however, bring that flexibility of a la carte. So if you really want to just get those transactional emails out, and then you want to choose another platform for analytics or another platform for content management, this is what this platform category allows. So if you want the everything in one suite where you've got your journeys, content management, analytics, then this category is not for you.
Alex, I was going to ask, what are some of the drawbacks of this type of platform? Or, I mean, we've gone over the benefits with Celia, but what are common bottlenecks or hurdles that our clients need to think about when they're primarily using this, or maybe augmenting their own program with a platform like this?
It's interesting. It's funny when we're working with a new client sometime, or we're working on a deliverability challenge a client has, and we'll say, how long have you been using SendGrid? And they say, we don't use SendGrid. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, you do. A lot of times, because of the speed, when developers, and you can tie a lot of these platforms to really the growth of mobile apps. right? And everything's public. I can sign up for an account. I have all the documentation I need as a developer, and I can get these messages triggered and out quickly. There's a lot of benefit to that. We definitely work with a lot of enterprise organizations who, rely on these tools for transactional messaging, specifically, or particular types of communications. And then I would say from working with, other companies over the years, it can be a little bit of a painful graduation into different platforms if it's fully developer based. You lose a developer, you don't have all of this stuff kind of documented, and you try to plug somebody else in to run the messages, and it can be a challenge. When you bring the marketers in and they need to do more interface based work in the platform, that can be a challenge. Also, kind of with the reporting, but this is a hot category. I just saw this morning when I was coming in that Spark Post had been sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's not it's a growing area of interest in the email space, but I don't think it's an either or here. It's, does the solution fit a particular piece of your program? And as long as you're doing the work to authenticate and protect your domain and manage, have more to manage at that level, you can do a lot of cool things.
These often pop up in conversations with B2B clients, obviously, but not always. If you've downloaded a white paper recently, odds are you've been added to a lead nurture program supported by one of these senders. Often these platforms have, deal with lead nurturing and selling support. Celia, what are the differences with how these types of platforms deal with data in particular?
Yeah, so you're getting past that more transactional, they did something, send something, and it's a one-off. Like you said, it's more lead nurturing. You start getting into, who is this contact? What are they doing with my business? How are they interacting with me? And so you're building more of a context around that contact versus being that transactional. And so when you're setting it up, that should be what you're thinking about. And when you start looking at billing, that even starts evolving around the contact versus how many sends are you actually making in that transactional. Again, this is more in the B2B company area, but has bled over to B2C a little bit as well, depending on your needs. Like Alex said earlier, not one of these is better or worse, or it's either or, but really, how are you using your data? How are you trying to look at your data? And that should really help you choose the right one. Yeah.
Automation.
Conversation with another colleague in the industry, and they kind of created the phrase marketing automation, right? That used to be just a strictly sales B2B type of description. Those lines have blurred so much. So many retail consumer programs are, heavily journeyed and automated. There's a lot of decisioning that goes into it. I think, one of our recent acquisition of LeadMD down in Arizona, who's really focused on B2B, these type of tools. And, when you're in a large organization, right, there is a lot of times there's the B2B side who's using one of these type of tools, heavily integrated into CRM and sales intelligence and all of those pieces. And so, that is a key piece. I mean, I've worked with companies where you have the developer-friendly program, the marketing automation platform, and then another ESP, and you're managing your program through a bunch of different tool sets. I do think when you're evaluating these type of tools, I think really to focus on the workflows, because they are heavily designed to be used a certain way. There's one extremely large company I have done work for, and they were basically using one of these tools as a newsletter software, and weren't using any of the features really that they bring to the table, and not ideal, right? So, but I think, focusing on that workflow, because you're going to have to follow it to a certain standpoint, And then the integrations, right? So integrations are key here. How seamless is the integration with CRM, with the different tools that are in your B2B, in your marketing mix?
Cheated. There's a 4A and 4B here. So the next category is 2 parts. But the first part, next generation. These technologies are slightly newer to the marketplace, but are making a splash. I'll leave it at that. Celia, what comes to mind when you think of next generation other than Star Trek?
Right. Well, so these have really taken on a new way of looking at what an ESP model is, and they are starting to integrate or develop themselves even some next gen technology that seems pretty cool. So when you open up an email and you have real-time data showing up based on who you are, you've got artificial intelligence built in, trying to figure out who you are, machine learning to drive content and messaging decisions. I mean, this starts getting a little bit more really cultivated to what you are as a person. And it's really cool to see. I might have clicked on something and then I get information because I was already searching for it. So, some may think that that's a little too much, but I think it's pretty cool that I don't have to then sift through all this information to find what I'm looking for. It's already served up to me. Kind of what to Alex's point a minute ago, these do sort of make you go through a certain workflow sometimes, though. There's unstructured data models that are thrown in there. They'll accept any type of data that you put in there, but it can be a slippery slope when you've got multiple people touching the platform and starting to put 50 versions of first name, for example, in their unstructured data. So it can build a little bit of a spider web, but as long as you've got that locked down as a team, then these are really great to use. Otherwise, the next part that we'll be talking about, they're a little bit more cloud-based. You can do a lot of different things in it based on what you're comfortable with. So that's just a little bit of the similarities here.
It's funny in email with next generation is 10 years old in some places, but I think the workflow thing is a really important point. I think one thing you see is sort of being built with the cross-channel approach, right? So it's not SMS, push, email, they're kind of all equal in a lot of these tools, and they were designed that way. Versus platforms that have been around and maybe brought those features in via acquisition or kind of bolt on. So if you're really trying to grow, and especially too if all of those channels are being developed in one team, it's really nice to be able to orchestrate everything you want to do really in one place, right? So that's something to think about. I do think on the data side of it, like if you're heavily rely on SQL queries and that type of thing, you can hit some roadblocks. So I would really, kind of going back to the beginning, right? What do you need to be able to do? Is that going to change? There's definitely it's funny, the mid-market kind of got hollowed out in email, right? A lot of acquisitions. And it started to be, there was MailChimp or Enterprise, for a while. So I think it's really healthy for the space that we have a new middle option, really key there. And I think, another piece as we get into, some of these areas is kind of Celia was talking about with the demos, right? A lot of times there's this cool demo feature and, are you going to use it? If you look at your program and 80% of the things you're doing over and over again, right? How much time is it creating for you, or how much sophistication do you need? A lot of tools, yes, they have great functionality and great features, but they can require very technical resources that some folks don't have. Just even, going through working like with AMP for email, for example, right? It all looks great. It's pretty complicated and it's a different type of coding than most email teams are used to. So I think really evaluating what your internal skill set is from your teams do you have the developer resources to bring a lot of these features to life, or do you have a partner, an agency, contractors, whatever you're doing? I think that's a real key to evaluate, to make sure, yeah, there's a lot of new stuff here, but how am I going to bring it to life, and what's required there is a huge consideration. But you're definitely you're definitely seeing a lot of competition against the players that have been out for a while with these markets. So it's an interesting evaluation process for sure.
I feel like there's something to say about big fish, small pond scenarios here, with a lot of getting to some interesting pricing negotiation depending on the size of the company if they're looking to land a whale, so to speak. So we'll talk about that later. Next slide. Enterprise platforms, as we're calling them. These are the platforms who may have gotten their start in one specific channel, but have evolved and grown over time to incorporate, as Alex was saying, kind of an omni-channel approach to Martech. Celia, you're obviously super familiar with these platforms. Who are the ideal candidates for these platforms? 1 minute or less. Just kidding.
1 word or less. So the ideal candidate is that you have, like Alex and Scott were saying, that you're multi-channel, you're trying to look at that holistic concept of what that contact is. And so no matter if it's SMS, search marketing, social media, email, whatever it is, you're really trying to figure out how they're interacting with your company. Some even include print media as part of their omni-channel approach. But again, it gives you that holistic look. You can touch and talk to these contacts in any different channel and really be able to really fine tune how you're looking at each of them, of the channels, and do best to get the highest ROI for that.
We talk about our history with these clients on one slide, or what are your thoughts on enterprise marketing clouds?
Nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM or AT&T or that kind of phrase, but I don't think it as much applies. A big consideration here is with the enterprise marketing clouds, right? There's 10 ways to do everything. You can do anything you want to do. To a certain standpoint, because they've been around, they have massive resources, how the tech works, but that can be a benefit and a drawback, right? So, can't tell you how many organizations we've come in and really kind of got to roll things back, and because the implementation sometimes doesn't match what people want to be able to do or can do internally. So I think, really thinking about how you're going to implement, what the workflows you're going to rely on is really key. And I think, also that cross-channel piece, right? A lot of the marketing clouds now have tons and tons of options, and doing an evaluation of what you actually need and what you're going to use, because let me tell you, they will not stop telling you about all of those features. But I think the way you go about it and the way you set things up is really crucial. And the other thing I would say too is looking, what's the roadmap? Is there innovation happening? If there's a real compelling vision and you're seeing the product move in that direction, do you align with that vision, right? Are you getting new features? Are the releases bug fixes, or are they actually new things? I think looking forward is really crucial here, and making sure that you're aligned with the same place that they're looking to go is so crucial.
Easy to get a product roadmap from your sales rep in some form or another. If it's not, red flag. So now is everyone's favorite part of a online webinar. We're going to go for polls right now. So interactive, woohoo. So we can bring up the poll real quick. The question is, which category do you run your program off of today? So you see the poll come up in the right-hand side of the screen. We'll get some answers in there. A lot of enterprise, a lot of marketing automation, a couple self-service. All right, wonderful. This will help. This will definitely help inform the question part of the conversation as we get there. So thank you. And one next generation. All right, good to know. That's the doorbell. If you hear my dog, her name is Ashland. All right. So that'll help us inform our discussion in the future. So if we go to the next couple slides, we're going to go through some common questions, your paths forward, right? So first kind of path, how do I better utilize my program without changing the Martech? So this, if you go to the next slide, so this question is basically asking, if I stay, where do I look for internal efficiencies? Celia, where's the first place you think of for looking for internal efficiency?
Personally my favorite part, because I love just getting in and like I said, those big group meetings where you're whiteboarding and documenting what are the processes, how are we interacting with this technology, because there's so many hidden nuggets that you can really say, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. How can we work together to make it easier? How can we work together to better use the technology we already have? A lot of times we're already paying for this technology and really not using it as well and as efficiently as we really can. So I really like doing this part. And again, it's looking at that assessment of what do we need to do? What do we want to do? What can we do? Oftentimes we have different processes and tech stacks because there was a changing of the guard, or there was differing in funds over the years. You know, COVID was really a hard hitter to a lot of organizations out there where IT funds just dried up. And so it was really looking at, okay, how can we do what we're supposed to do for our clients and for our organization without spending a dime? And so a lot of process changes happened last year. A lot of people really took that internal view so that they can do what they needed to do without changing, without implementing, without doing anything.
You know, we get brought in, you know, I like to say, you know, we need help or we need help with. Those are usually kind of two common scenarios, and that, you know, we need help. A program's kind of plateaued, right? There's a lot of failures in automations or QA issues or, you know, what have you. One thing we recommend doing a lot, and, you know, the eye-opening aspect of it is, you know, really process mapping and really mapping out how the program functions and all the pieces and the players that are involved. You know, I've seen organizations that have like 45 steps across 9 people to get a message out, right? You can't really blame the technology for some things. And you know, there was one company I worked with, and we were going through these exercises in the business rules, and the entire country of Australia had never received a message in the past 12 months because they were getting excluded in the business rules, right? The program just kind of got so large and it was just hard to keep track. So a lot of times it's just like rolling back to the mission statement of the program and then looking at, you know, are we boiling the ocean in some respects? Are we not putting enough energy in other pieces? Are we doing repetitive tasks over and over and over again? That's taking up a lot of time. I think a lot of times if you take a step back and look process and people first, then step into the tech, really document, you know, is your program documented is a key piece, right? Can somebody step in and they understand how all of this stuff works? Going through those type of exercises can be really good to make sure. I mean, our, you know, we don't ever just want to go in recommending switching your tech, right? It takes a lot of time. A lot of times the people who make the call on the switch aren't there when it's completed, right? You know, so I think those are some areas I would look at to look at it. Process, people, workflows, and then step into all the logic and, you know, all your tasks.
Yeah, special shout out to Brandy Aubrey, who's done a lot of these kind of process mapping exercises for clients, and the amount of aha moments in the room are they're numerous. When Brandy's like, "Did you know there were 20 people involved with getting an email out the door?" And they're like, "Oh, no, I did not. Thank you." And so, shout out to Brandy. If we go to the next slide, please. How do I evolve my program with additional tech or data? So in this scenario, we stay with our current tech stack, but integrate and evolve as a team, right, with additional data or capabilities. This, as Alex was saying, this is our preferred option. It's quite a large lift to move tech stacks. Understatement of the year in a year full of understatements, right? So we like to make sure that we are exhausting all of our options before putting that on the table as a serious consideration. Celia, thoughts on evolving and integrating?
Enterprise-wide platforms that bundle everything in-house. You've also had companies that are getting really good and being niche experts in analytics or content management. And so we're really trying to look for those faults or things that we're missing from the current platform, and then be able to plug them into what you're using. So if you're in a developer friendly platform, for example, and you want a content management system to really help the marketing team work on the content to then deliver in the email, that's a great marry of not only the people and processes, but also the technology behind the scenes. In fact, a previous client that I was working on, they're trying to do everything data-wise in the more enterprise-wide platform. And we found that just backing that out and having that as the email pipeline, for example, and then using their CRM to do more of the, who is this contact? What do they do? What are their sales? And diving into what that contact is more in a CRM and then plugging that into the email platform worked out so much better for them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the email has great ROI as a channel, right? And there's a lot of things that can start eating into that. And that's a real crucial thing to evaluate, is are we getting the bang for the buck with the ecosystem around our program? I think also with, I kind of call them the plugins or the, what have you into how you're going about it is, if you really look and evaluate where your most of your time is spent, there might be really key solutions that you can bring to the table if it's around, if it's around data integration, if it's around production, email development tools. Are you struggling there? There's a lot of great tools out there now that can plug that gap. So I think, it kind of ties to the previous question, really. It's really evaluating where you're spending the most of your time. And then also, in the performance of your program, right? Are you heavily personalizing, but not really seeing the performance from it? I think doing that kind of evaluation there. Are you automating everywhere that you can? Are we hoarding data and not really using any of it? Right? It's kind of, so much legacy and like baggage you can have in a program that, I can't tell you how many times, I've just seen that where there's really overcooked kind of stuff. And I think there's a lot of great tech out there that can be useful in your program. And I think if the investment in, additional integration can really pay off over time. It might be somewhat of an upfront cost, but if you're getting massive productivity gains or performance gains, I think it's really crucial to look at. What do you think, Scott?
I come to work and think whatever, so I'm good with that. No, I think the legacy data thing is a big, I've run into that many times on the client side where we're not using this data, or they have an add update, or they have an overwrite every file as opposed to just an add update. So there's a lot of legacy processes that are probably there because it's good enough for now, and no one wants to. Oftentimes, email programs are kind of set in this sustain or maintain bubble, not a lot of growth unless it's a new program or an app or you're really convincing internally, which is surprising because, like you alluded to, email has often pointed to as one of the best ROI of a channel, right? It's $1 in, $40 out, depending on what study you're looking at. And a lot of that has to do with, are you making sure you're wringing that sponge of all the water around operational efficiency? Oftentimes that's kind of an untapped fertile ground to mix metaphors. I'm a consultant. I mix metaphors all the time. So if we go to the next slide, this is the kind of the last option, which is, should I stay or should I go? This is go, switch providers. choosing one that better supports your Martech needs. Alex, what are your thoughts on the nuclear option?
Is the option there. I think you go back to your email business model, right? What is email being hired to do at this organization, right? And what do we think we can be able to do that we're not doing? Now, the other piece too, in more mature programs, that is a trap you can fall into, which is we're switching from this one to this one, and then we want to migrate exactly how this one worked over to the new one, which might not be how the new one is best set up. So instead of just going like heads down into, okay, we have this journey, or we have these we have these particular things and we want to do them exactly the same way, which might run into huge challenges. It's more of looking at what you want to do and how that would work in the new platform, and be open to the best way to do it there, and setting to try to like exactly migrate particular experiences. I think that's a crucial thing. I think when you look at your data and the speed you need in your data, looking at integrations, and then those workflows are just so crucial, right? Don't get too enamored with bells and whistles until you really understand what it's going to take day to day to manage. And then, I think I saw a question in the chat, which was, around security and privacy with your provider. That's table stakes these days. You have to have a strong security component there, and I would be looking for, is there a breach in the past? Just look them up, right, and make sure you're comfortable with it.
I've had to take ESPS off the developer-friendly platform list. I've had to take a couple of them off when I was on the client side because of those security, which they've patched now, obviously. But you got to keep your thumb on the pulse of that, which is my message from our Chief Privacy Officer, Chris Arundel. I've stuck that in.
Celia, too with that though, if they won't do a risk assessment, or they're not willing to provide you with the detail, like for the financial services example, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Right. So if they're, they should be able to answer any question and alleviate any concern you have around security and privacy. And if they're not willing to engage there, I'd be looking somewhere else.
And they should be able to come to the table with industry specific examples. Don't let them do this is the e-commerce solution we put in front of everyone, because you're going to see a bunch of, if you're an e-commerce company, great, but don't let them put e-commerce solutions in front of you if that's not going to fit your model. That's a pretty common, this is in my pitch deck, so I'm going to present it. Celia, sorry, Alex, go.
We've run RFPs for a lot of companies around this, right? When they've kind of decided that it's time to find something new, and it can be it's interesting when you go through that process sort of as an outside, kind of an outsider, but ultimately they're going to make the decision, right? We can make a recommendation, but who we invite a lot of times is based on the program, based on the particular needs, based on where they're trying to go. And it's really interesting. I kind of equate it to like The Bachelor giving the rose out, and everybody at home's like, Kevin is the choice, right? He checks all the boxes, and then she picks Joe. And you're like, what? How'd it go, Joe? And a lot of times that's the people and the culture. And this is going to be my provider and my support, and are they, that component that's hard to quantify is a huge factor. So many in process I've seen. So it's the culture of the company. Does it match? Do you like that experience? That's always kind of an unquantified factor in where companies end up going. I've seen.
Agreed. Celia, when you are either in a position or proposing a position to start over with a client, what's first thing that come to mind?
Services example, privacy should be across the board for all, no matter which category. So yeah, to your point, make sure that it's an example that they can give you from your industry and make sure it fits. But you'd also should be looking at, if I'm in this platform already and it's just not what I needed, I got sold on the demo and it had all these bells and whistles, but I'm really only using 10% of it. That might also be a sign that it's time to go. It's never easy. Of course, there's always transition, change management, and all of that. But if you're in that situation, it might also be a time to have nuclear or pull off the Band-Aid. For example, I'm working on a current client who was in a large enterprise platform, and it just wasn't doing what they were trying to do. They're trying to send more transactional. They've got a lot of unstructured data. So we've actually been moving them to a more next gen and more developer friendly even. So sometimes those categories blend a little bit, but this particular provider was perfect for them so that they could get their emails out in the way that they needed to.
I go to conferences and when I hear it depends, it drives me crazy. So I don't know the specifics around what what your requirements are from a data and privacy perspective, but I will say that we work with financial service companies. If they don't require an on-prem solution, which I know some are just, they have to be on-prem. If they do allow for SaaS modeling for sending messages, I mean, Salesforce is one that we tend to rely on from a privacy and security standpoint. They're pretty good, but we can get more specific with that answer if I know the specifics of what the requirements are from a privacy perspective. But thank you for asking the question. I hope that was a little bit better than it depends. So sorry.
And we'd be happy to help you out.
Of course.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, shameless plug. I don't want to do that. All right. You guys loved the first one. We're doing a second one. Time for another poll question. Poll question: what are you doing to unlock your program's full potential? So, Hannah, we got Hannah in the background running a little bit of how the sausage is made here. But if we can get that poll up. The suspense is killing me too. There we go. The answers are: stay, utilize without touching the tech stack; stay, but add new tech stack and data capabilities; go, switch platforms; or we're feeling good, no major changes. We were taking bets on where this was going to land earlier. So I'm about to win $1. So this is great. So we've made it to the Q&A portion of the main event here. Thank you, Brittany, for starting the questions. Are there any other major questions? Hannah, I don't know if you've been able to start curating some in the background, but we're here for a Q&A session, or we can just talk about TV shows we like.
Would your recommendations for EMPs differ by industry? What are your best EMP recs for financial services?
Oh, so that was the one I tried to. So for financial services, we work with the enterprise level senders, unless asterisks they require an on-prem security solution, in which case you probably are stuck with an on-prem, which limits your options right there. But specifically, I mean, Salesforce is tried and true from a privacy and compliance perspective. So it would probably be who I would start with. But if we get more specific list of questions, I can definitely get more specific with that answer. That's kind of my general catch-all, though. Alex, what are your thoughts?
It's kind of interesting with Bronto going end of life, right? So Bronto heavily focused on e-commerce, a lot of great e-commerce type of features built right in. Not a great parallel for that in the space. That's gonna make a hole there. So I mean, I think if you're looking for like industry specific features, I think that can be a little bit of a challenge. But you should be able to provide what you need to do, provide what you want to do, and get a pretty compelling vision of how that's going to work. And then that should be supported by some industry examples. You are going to see different ESPs spike in certain areas just because of maybe how they deal with data, maybe what their personalization options are, maybe what their cost is, right? So it's the Bronto example, since it was so specific and built in, I think is going to be interesting for folks moving off that platform, because I don't think they're going to see a lot of apples to apples functionality in other places. But you should still be able to do what you need to do. So kind of going back to that, you know, try to rethink some of the experiences in how that product works, then getting stuck with this is how it has always worked, so it must work this way, right?
What about recommendations for the publishing industry?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Lisa. We work with a couple of major publishers. If they're on the website, I can talk about. Gannett's one of them. So that's a major publisher. WebMD publishes a lot of content aggregation. So depending on the model and what you're looking to put in front of your subscribers, it can work a couple of different ways. But generally, what you're looking for from a publishing model is ways of the platform being able to easily repurpose content from a single source of truth, right? So you're pushing data into a oh sure, I'll get the second poll in just a second. I don't know. You're pushing data into the platform in kind of a dedicated area that is meant for, you know, you have your primary, secondary, tertiary spots all mapped out already, and that content is being pulled in from some sort of either web logic or even if it's a manual. Here's the articles that we're going to be running. You don't want to necessarily have a platform where you have to lift and shift a lot of that manually. You want automated, you know, API content driven. We've seen solutions where those developer-friendly platforms are actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting for publishing, because all they're doing is scraping the content that lives in either the CMS or even directly on the site via RSS feed right into the body of the email, reducing the amount of human error or even just an FTE that you need to have doing that. So depending on what you're looking to do from, sorry, this is it depends, Lisa. I apologize for that. But there are a couple of it's a good problem to have. There's a couple different solutions on how we've either augmented an existing program or replaced and started a net new process for publishing partners. Celia, Alex, any questions or comments?
Yeah, you know, I think from on the publishing side, you know, one trait you see is a lot of authors or a lot of stakeholders that need to be able to build emails. So the production component is really key there. Is it really simple? Does it require a lot of training, or, you know, am I going to have to know some HTML or some scripting to be able to get a message out the door, or is it really simple? And then the CMS integration piece is crucial. You know, if it's if you can have a way where you're mainly doing the heavy lift of the email in the CMS, and it's really just kind of passing over to the ESP and going out the door, I would look very specifically at, you know, building workflows, CMS integrations, and then the other thing is really good subscription management, right? So, you know, some publishing companies we work with have, you know, 200 different email subscriptions, right? And how easy is it to manage that is really key. That the platform and the data and the subscription model match those type of rule sets.
One platform or other is making sure that you have ASCII compliant characters and not using like M dashes or things that people traditionally would be fine with using in like a Word situation, but you want to make sure your data is future-proofed in a way where you can push that and not worry about special character or wingding showing up in your final deliverable. Celia, sorry,
yeah.
you had
something. No, I agree with all of that, and especially the last point, Alex, that you brought up about audience segmentation. I mean, this goes back to those larger enterprise platforms where you can do multi-channel, omni-channel approach within that. So if you do have the push from the website into the email platform, and we call it email platform loosely, but it's all of those channels, that same content can be reused automatically in all of those channels. And it depends on, too, how much of a reliance do you have on IT to be able to help kind of set you up, or an agency to help set you up. So all of those factors have to go into choosing what's the right category for you.
Left for any other additional questions? Oh, perfect.
So what can the average marketing team do right now to enhance our email program?
What are your thoughts on that one?
is a stakeholder or touches the platform and go through what each process is. How do we get our data? What do we do from a content perspective? Where is all the content coming from? Is it manually written at the time of send, or is there content coming, like we talked about for publishing, from a website, for example? What are all of those pipes and dependencies? And then look at how we can streamline that. Is it simply making a calendar to see when certain marketing, when people on the marketing team have access to the tool, for example, so you're not stepping on each other. So, I mean, there's little things that you can implement to make the process better without changing technology as well.
I would say, you know, doing it right now, there's two things here. One, test, right? If you're not testing, you're leaving money on the table and potentially going to lose some audience. And I think the other thing too is challenge your internal best practices for email. You know, well, I think, you know, one company was kind of like, well, you know, we only put one thing in an email, one button. An email can only have one thing in it. I hate that because there's two things in it. There's the button and then there's an unsubscribe. Those are terrible odds. You don't want to do. So, I mean, that would be an example of challenge that best practice, right? The best practices change over time. What worked 2 years ago might not be working as good as something else could be right now. So really look at your program and see, you know, challenge all of those things internally that might have formed over time. Why do we do it this way? I think look at your program through a new lens, and then try to build testing into as much as you can do, and try to learn things, right? So have a hypothesis on what you're trying. How do we make this audience behave the way that we want to? What's the angle, right? Approach your testing where you can actually learn something from it and reapply it. Never fails in my experience.
And if you're doing that right, in my opinion, other teams will be going to you to learn things the same way they'd be going to a site UX team, right? Like, there's another option for a stakeholder or a product owner to kind of understand, get that direct user feedback. I always die on the user feedback or sentiment tracking hill, so here's my spiel. But it's a great way to inform product roadmaps, or, you know, I don't know what to change next about my program. Have you checked your reply mail management? There's a lot of opinions in there that it's kind of the mold in the walls analogy. You want to make sure you're checking that before you move forward with any additional projects. So, Celia, any last thoughts? We'll see. The last word was Celia.
Yeah, so back to Alex with testing, you can do all of the testing, make sure that you're getting all that feedback. And then something simple you can also do is just use that feedback to segment your audience. And, you know, a lot of us are working at home. A lot of us are getting all this information now in our emails and SMS. People are trying to reach people because we're not going as much to be out in the world. So, you know, if you can segment your audience and be able to really give and serve up that information that they are searching for based on your preferences, based on testing, you know, you can really make a connection and have more stickiness with that contact.
Switch. If anybody tells you it's going to be painless and it's going to happen exactly in this particular time frame and it's going to be a piece of cake, they're lying straight to your face. There's going to be bumps in the road. Stick with it, and you know, really try to rethink your program through the new tool that you choose. And if you need, I know some people were looking for us to pick a specific one to recommend them. You know, send us an email and we can maybe help you narrow it down.
I want to say thank you for everyone who attended and stayed to the end. Make sure you download the PDF, which was, I think, just put in the chat. Thank you, Hannah, for kind of running the back end of this. And thank you to our presenters today, Alex and Celia. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, everyone.